Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to continue on our SketchUp models using Enscape, and I'm going to cover a little bit more about Enscape and SketchUp sort of in general and some of the cool things that we can do with Enscape as we are building out our models. And then next week we're going to talk a little bit about actually rendering out images and creating our 3D walkthroughs and stuff like that. But for today, I just want to go a little bit more in depth with some of the techniques that you can use when you're sort of building out your scene. So as you can see here from my Enscape view, I did quite a bit of work between last week and this week, getting all my materials in here, adding in some little pieces of entourage around the scene just to make it look a little bit more realistic. So I'll kind of pan around here and show you everything that I added in. So, just here and there, added in little objects just to make the scene look a little bit more lively. Some pictures on the wall, threw a little guitar in the corner. I mean, I don't have a guitar, but, just things to make it look a little bit more interesting. Back here, I changed my bookshelf to some floating shelves, and I threw some books on them and just some little decorations. So anything that you can do whenever you're building out a scene to render to make it look more realistic, you should do as much as you can, because it's just going to bring the whole thing to life and make it look a lot better than just a plain scene with only like pieces of furniture in it. And there's no life to it if you don't really add in some of the extra stuff. So this makes it just look a whole lot more realistic and kind of takes it to the next level. I added some blinds in front of the window as well, which is giving us some nice little shadow effects. So anything that you can think of like that when you're doing a real project that you could throw in there just to add another layer of detail to the scene, you should go ahead and go the extra mile and throw that stuff in. But all of this didn't really even take me that long. 95% of the stuff that I put in here was taken straight out of the Enscape asset library that I showed you last week. So literally just went in there, scrolled through, and I found some different objects that I thought would look good in the scene. And then I just dragged and dropped them out of the asset library directly into SketchUp and just placed them directly onto the desks and the walls and stuff like that. So really, really easy, not complicated at all. And they all have materials on them already, so you don't really need to go in and mess with those and tune them to get them looking right. Like, they're going to look pretty good from the start. The only things that I modeled extra, well, I didn't model this, but this was taken from the 3D warehouse. So this sconce here I put in, and then I tweaked the materials on that, which I'm going to show you a little bit more of that in depth here in a minute. This was taken from Enscape, and these shelves. So I just modeled the shelves, and then I put some books on top of them. And then I did an array vertically. So I built one here down low, and then I copied it up, and then I just hit 2x on my array to create the third one to make them all evenly spaced. So that's all I did there. And then I just went and took some Enscape books and little objects and just threw them on top of there just to fill it up and make it look a little bit more interesting. All right. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about visual settings and lighting. All right. So whenever you are building out your scenes to render, the things that are going to make them look most realistic is the lighting. So lighting can kind of make or break a scene, and that's the biggest thing that is going to impact the way it looks. Does it look fake or does it look realistic? And the lighting plays a huge, huge role in that. So whenever you're rendering something in 3D modeling, you want to consider, your external light sources or your natural light sources like the sun and things like that, but then also your artificial light sources. So things like this desk lamp, for example, or this sconce. And also in a lot of projects you'll be doing, you'll be working a lot with like recessed can lighting, and also maybe some troffer lights if it's like in an office space with like an ACT ceiling. But all of that needs to be finely tuned in order to make it look as good as you possibly can. So you don't, that if you're gonna you know, cut corners on something, make sure that it's not your lighting. So I'm gonna show you how we can go in and add in some artificial light sources now to an Enscape scene, because it works a little bit differently in here in SketchUp than it does in Revit. So in Revit, if you remember back to some of our previous lectures that we've done, like when I was showing you guys how to build that custom light fixture, for example, how it had that yellow light source within the family editor, that's what actually is transmitting that light. Like that yellow, it looks sort of just like a yellow ball, sort of like inside of my family editor. And that's what Revit uses to distribute lighting. Okay, so they have a bunch of different types of light sources. You can have one that's just basically a point that emits light evenly in all directions. You can have one that's more of a downlight where it's just shooting the light down in one direction and sort of more like a cone shape. All these different light sources are built directly into Revit, and you don't need to worry about them as much, because if you're pulling families to throw in your Revit projects, usually they will have those kind of baked in and you don't really have to tweak them too much. Maybe you'll have to adjust the intensity or something like that, but you won't have to worry too much about the actual light source itself. Now here in Enscape, for SketchUp, you have another tool at your disposal. Since SketchUp doesn't work the same way as Revit, right? We have to add in our own light sources that Enscape is going to render for us. So right now I don't have any light sources in here except for the external lighting coming from the sunshine. So I have these two interior lights that are going to be producing artificial light, but right now they're not casting any light at all. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you how we can make them cast lighting. And this is going to apply to any light source that you put into your model. Okay, if it's a recessed downlight, you know, a track light or a sconce or a desk lamp, anything like that. All right. So I'm going to hop over here to my SketchUp view, and I'm going to make sure that my live updates are not active so that my computer works a little bit faster. And I'm just going to start with this desk lamp over here. So I'm going to double click on that to isolate it within the view so I can work directly on it. And what I'm looking for is my lighting button. So here it's called Enscape Objects. So if I click on that, it's going to bring up this little window where I can create these different light sources. Now when you do this, you have to consider what type of a light source am I going to be putting out. For something like a recessed can light, you're going to be working a lot with spotlights. But for something like a desk lamp or a sconce, mostly you'll be working with like a sphere light. So you can see that one is just like a typical light bulb. So what I'm going to do is click on that, and then it's going to, in my viewport, make this yellow sort of ball shape. So now I just want to click on my model, sort of where that light is going to be emitting from, and I want to place it right there. And it's going to do something like a little bit weird. Like first, it's going to ask you to place like the initial point for the light, and then it's still connected to it, and it wants you to like click another time. I don't really know why it does this, but you can kind of just drag down a little bit and then click again, and it's going to build that light source for you. So now it looks just like a big ball shape. And then here is where you actually control the intensity of it and the size of it. So if I click X to make my model the X-ray mode, I'm going to move the middle of the light source, which is the origin right there, and I want to make sure that it's up sort of like inside of the shade a little bit, somewhere like that. So because of the way that this is modeled, since it's an Enscape asset, it's a little bit hard to see like what's actually up inside the shade. So we're going to have to jump back and forth between here and Enscape and kind of see how it's rendering. So now that I have that placed, I'm just going to toggle on my live updates, and then I'm going to pop over to my Enscape view, and I'm going to kind of go over to my lamp and see if we can figure out how the light is emitting. So right now it doesn't really look like much is coming out of this light fixture. So I might need to adjust the intensity of it. So I'm going to pull up this window here, and I'm going to try to bring up this luminous intensity a little bit and see if that will kind of amp up the brightness. And it also might be a case of me needing to close out of Enscape and reopen it because of the way my computer is going. So I actually might just do that really quick and see if that makes a difference, because I should be seeing something here. So I'm going to just relaunch that really quickly. All right, so the reason that wasn't working is because I guess you cannot actually place light sources within Enscape objects like that. So what you're going to have to do is place it just within the model itself. So right now this is not inside of the lamp, it's just inside the model floating, and then I can group it together with the lamp like that, and then I can go inside of that lamp group and I can move the light source where I need it to go. Now when I go back here and I turn on my live updates, it should be lit up just like that. So now you can see the light is actually coming out of the lamp. It's just a little bit too intense. So then I can go in here and I can bring up my light settings. And let's get this window back up here. Okay, so now I can see both of them, and I can just tweak this intensity setting down a little bit so that it's just a lot more subtle. So it's just something you're going to have to kind of mess around with to get looking right. So maybe something around 20 would be good, like that. So there's one. But something else that you can actually do is tweak the actual color of the light that's being emitted. So right now you can see it's kind of putting out just a very cold neutral white color. But if I wanted that to be something a little bit warmer, I can go back into my SketchUp view and I can apply a material directly to this light source and tweak the color of it. So I'm going to go here to my materials settings, scroll up a little bit, and then I'm going to pick a color. And I'll just pick a color that's close to the shade of light that I'm looking for, or the color temperature. And then I'm going to apply that directly to that light source there. Now I'm just going to check it So re-enable that. And it looks like it might be slightly warmer, but I can go into the Enscape material editor now and I can get it looking pretty much exactly how I want it. So I'm just going to rename this to be light source. And then pull up my material editor. And then I'm going to try to get it so I can see the light in the background of my material editor. Of course, it doesn't want to let me. It's very hard working on only a single monitor. It's much easier when I'm able to work on both of them, because anytime you want to do something with the Enscape sort of editors and stuff like that, it wants to bring the entire SketchUp screen on top of the Enscape viewport. All right, so now I'm in here and I can switch the material type to be self-illuminated. And once that is set to self-illuminate, I can come in here and change the color. So I'm going to go to advanced, and I'm just going to do something really dramatic so that you can kind of see that it's working. So if I go to like blue and change it to blue, now you can see it's putting out this blue color, right? So it's pretty cool. But I'm going to switch it back to something a little bit warmer. So you could use these crazy colors, say if you're doing something that has like Philips Hue bulbs or something like that, where you can set it to be any color you want. But it's really up to you. You can do like a ton of really cool things with the lighting. So I don't know, something like that is probably fine. Stick with that for right now. All right, now that I have that done, I'm going to basically do the same thing for my sconce over here. And yeah, I'm just going to copy it basically. I'll show you the other light sources too here in a minute. But for right now, I'm just going to copy this one that I made over. So Control C on there. Then I'm going to go back to my main model, and I'm going to turn off my live updates so I can work a little bit more smoothly. And I'm going to go over to my sconce, and I'm just going to, actually I should be able to paste it directly into here, I think. So I'm going to paste there because this is not an Enscape asset, and I'm just going to click a point on there so that it stays relatively close, and then I'm going to use my views to fine tune it. So switching my camera to parallel projection, and then zooming in and using my move tool to just line it up directly like right on that light bulb. Then I'm going to go to a side elevation view so I can see how high it is, and I might just want to move it down somewhere around there slightly, and then I can turn my live updates back on and see if it's looking correct. Oh, went a little bit too far. I'm gonna bring up my views, and I can just set my view back to being inside. There we go. All right, so you can see that it's working, but it doesn't look the best. So I'm actually going to change the type of light source that I have in here. So right now, it's just emitting light out in every direction, but since it's doing that, it's shooting it upward, and it's making it so it's casting these weird shadows, which in reality, it might actually do that. But I think in this case, it might be better to use a sort of downlight so that it's just casting the light downward, and maybe that'll look a little bit better. So I'm going to go back here, not to Photoshop, to SketchUp. Yeah, my computer's really not liking me today. All right, so we're back here in SketchUp, and I'm just going to replace this with a different type of light. So I'm going to delete that out, and then go back to my Enscape objects, and then I'm going to choose Spot as my light source type. And I'm just going to pan around underneath here. And I'm going to turn off live updates so that it doesn't keep being slow. And then I'm going to click a point right on the bottom of my light bulb, and I'm just going to drag down slightly because it makes me click twice. I don't know why they do that. And I don't know what happened to it. It must have just disappeared. Let's try that again. Click once, drag down, click twice. Oh, I have to click 3 times. That's what I gotta do. And then you click the 3rd time to set the angle. So it's really finicky when you're doing those. All right, now what I can do is use my move tool, and I can move this upward so that it's more inside of the shade there. And now I'm going to turn my live updates back on and see if that looks any better. All right, cool. So that does look a little bit better. And what I can do is, let's see, pull my light settings back up just like I did for the other one. And I can adjust how bright that is. And you can even adjust the beam angle. So if you want it to be like a wider spread or a narrower spread, you can kind of see what that's doing in the background. Okay, and then I might even go in and just move this upward a touch higher. So if I go back here and then move it upward ever so slightly, let's just do like 2 inches and see what that does. Okay, so that looks like it's coming out a little bit better. And then I can just apply my light source material to it to match the color of the other one. And now that looks a little bit better. So now if I zoom back out here, you can see now we get those 2 artificial light sources. All right, cool. So that spotlight, what I did there is basically the exact same thing that you would do for like a recessed can light. And they actually have some of those built into Enscape. So if you need to use those for your rendering, you can pull them straight from the Enscape library. So let me show you really quick. If I go here to Asset Library, and let me switch back out here to just the regular Enscape or SketchUp model. I can go into lighting, and you can see that they have these ones here like ceiling lamp 06. So I could go into my ceiling group, and then I can grab one of those and I can just plop it on the ceiling there. And then I can go to, again, my light sources. And choose spotlight. And then click a few times like that. And then I'm going to go to a side view. I'm going to move it upward so that it's right on that. And then I'm going to apply my color to it. And let's see, let's go to a floor plan view and go to X-ray mode and then center it up in the room. Like that. Then go back into live updates. And you can see it's casting light down into the room, which is what we want. Now this isn't the best looking one. It's kind of a weird light fixture. So usually what I do is I just model my own. Man, my computer is really breaking on me. Come on. All right, there we go. So I'm going to show you really quickly how you can model your own that looks better really easily. So very simple. I'm just going to delete this one out of here. And then let's regroup the ceiling so that it's separate from this light source that I'm about to model. And then I can just go to my top-down view, go to X-ray mode, and then I'm going to create a circle. And I'm just going to get it close to the middle of that light source. And let's make this like a 5-inch downlight. So we'll go 2.5 inches diameter, or radius, I mean. And then I can extrude this downward, maybe by 1/4 inch. And then I can go to my offset in about 1/4 inch, and then this part right here, I can just recess that about 1/8 inch, and just like that I have a very simple little recessed can light. Then all I have to do is apply a light source material to the middle part so it looks like it's glowing, and then for the rest of it I can apply just like a white color. So I have my ceiling paint right there that I used, and I can just select the whole thing and then deselect that, and then I can apply the ceiling paint to that portion of the light. Now what I can do is group this together. So triple click and then make group, and I'm going to select the light source and the downlight, and I'm going to make those a group. And then I'm going to go into that group and I'm going to adjust the position of my light source. So let's see, I want to go to a side view, make sure it's parallel projection, grab my light source and then move it sort of to the midpoint right there, and then Yeah, we can put it on the center of the group right there. Perfect. And then we could even select this and then make it a component. And then this can be a recessed can light. And now it'll appear over here in our component library. So if I go to components and go to in model, should be able to find it over in here. It's in there somewhere, just believe me. I just have so many things loaded into this right now that it's hard to like find it, but yeah, this is now over here, and you could just drag and drop them into the model as you need. So now I just want to make sure that it's against the bottom of my ceiling. So go to a side view and then move it vertically, holding shift to align with one of these points over here. So now that's touching the ceiling. And if I go back, turn on my live updates, switch back to Enscape, you can see there's my downlight there in the middle of the ceiling. And if I were to go to my material settings, come on, and find that material. I'm trying to remember what I called it. Light source. I can now go in here and kind of play with the luminance of that to make it look more like it's glowing. So now you can see it looks a little bit more like it's actually glowing, which is cool. And I might even tweak the color a little bit so it looks a little bit less yellow. Oh, that's what I did. So I need to set this to be white where it says that, and I want to set the self-illuminance color, not the albedo color. So now I'll just pick one of these. And then that should look a little bit more neutral. So that looks a little bit better. Now maybe I do have to set albedo color. So let's try that too. All right, so that looks a little bit better. Cool. So there's my artificial lights in the model. And I'm actually going to get rid of this one because I don't have one in real life. Just want to show you how to make them. But you can kind of see how you do that. All right, so it's not too difficult to put those little lights in. And if I were to switch this to be like a nighttime mode, you would probably see it a lot better. They'll actually kind of light up the room a little bit, depending on how bright you make them, but you can see that the light's being cast out nicely, and it's sort of highlighting everything that's underneath of it. Really quickly, I'm going to show you something called IES profiles. So IES profiles are basically a way to customize the way that the light is being emitted. These are available in Revit as well, but when you're doing it here in SketchUp, you do it a little bit differently. But I'm going to show you really quickly how you do that. All right, so if you go to Google and you just type in IES profiles free, just click on one of these links. So I'll just choose this one. So this image is basically showing you what IES profiles are. And if you look at this example rendering here, you can see the way that the downlights are casting the light. They have this like unique shape or profile to them. And that's kind of what all these are. They're just different ways to spread the light out, and different manufacturers of light fixtures. Especially when you're downloading ones from Revit, they're going to have these IES profiles built into them so that the light distribution looks correct based on the light fixture that you're downloading. So like what we have in Enscape right now, like this is just a very generic looking one. Like there's nothing real special about the way that the light is being transmitted, but we can easily download these and then make it look a little bit better. So I went ahead and I just clicked download right there, and it downloaded the zip file. So I'm just going to open that, and I'm going to go up one level to my downloads folder, and I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to click extract all, and then just click extract, and that's just going to open that zip file for me within my downloads folder. And now what I can do is go back into my SketchUp model, and I'm going to turn off my ceiling really quick. And then I'm going to go into the sconce family or component, and I'm going to select the light source, turn my ceiling back on. Then I can go back into the Enscape objects with that selected, and I can click this setting here that says load IES profile. And now I can go to that folder, and I can go in there to IES profiles, and then you can see all these different types. All right. And this is something that you might want to play around with, but you can just click on them and you can click open, and then you can go back into your Enscape view and see what it looks like. All right, you can see that kind of changed it a little bit, so now it's got a different shape to it. And then I'm just going to see again if I can pull this off to the side so we can just see the light there. And then I'll load another one in. So let's zoom in on that pretty closely. And we'll see if we can get one that we like. So we'll uncheck that and we'll check it again. And I'll just try this one, define diffuse, see what that looks like. So you can see that one's casting a little bit more outward with less definition in the middle. So I think that one's going to be fine. But using these IES profiles are just a really nice way to make it look just that extra level bit more realistic. So definitely use those if you want to. And I'll go ahead and I'll just upload those to the Canvas page. So if you just want to download them from there as well and try them out, you can, but they're super easy to use. And then you can also use them within Revit. So whenever you're creating those light source distributions within Revit, so like in the family editor, for example, you can just click on those. And then if you choose the parametric web option for the light source, you can specify one of these IES profiles. So it's really pretty much the same thing over there too, which is cool. All right, so I think that's pretty good on lighting. Let me see here. The only other thing that maybe I could show you is the way that I did this sconce shade right there. So in my material editor, if I were to pull that up really quick and then go to my shade, so the way that I made this, so this is the shade that goes on there, right there. That is set to be a self-illuminated material. And then I applied this texture here, which is called a cutout texture, right? So what a cutout does is basically, if you think back to when we did Photoshop and we were using masks, you're basically defining a mask and it's only allowing areas that are white on the mask to be transparent, and then any other area is going to be solid, anything that's black. All right. Now, when it comes to creating sort of these translucent looking materials within Enscape, it gets kind of tricky, because if you were just using this as regular transparency, so if I were to go here and then go to my well, actually, I can't do it with that. Like typically what you would do is set this to be a generic material. And then you come down here and under transparency, it asks you for transparency type. And you have two options. You have cutout or you have transmittance. And transmittance is basically you just saying how clear do you want the glass to be? And do you want it to be frosted? All those kind of things. All right, so if I were to set the opacity down a ways and then go back to my view here, you can see like it looks kind of weird, like that shade does. So I'm going to switch this back to daytime so you can see it a little bit more clearly. Come on. Okay. So you can see now it just looks like glass, but like in reality, I want that to be more of like a milky shade, because I'm not, like the one that I have in reality is not just clear glass like that. It's more of like a translucent looking material. So if you're going to do something like that, the only really good way to do it is to switch this to a emissive material or a self-illuminated material. And then you have to come down here and you have to use this cutout transparency option. So right now, if I were to look at this without that, it's just totally solid, right? And I can't really see the light bulb through it, which in reality I can. So if you want to take it that next step further, you can use this option here that says cutout transparency. Now what you can do with that, and this is just sort of a trick, okay? This is a trick that I found out. You go into Photoshop and you create a new file. So new, and then we're gonna make this a 16 by 16, something really small, okay? File, and then we're just gonna click create. And then we'll just go here and we'll go to edit, fill, 50% gray, all right? And then click OK, and that's gonna make that square gray. Then you go to File and then Save As. And then you just save that as, and I saved mine as solid cutout. So you just get this tiny little gray square as your little texture map. Then what you do is you go here to Cutout Transparency. You click on Texture. And then give it a second. It's going to ask you where do you want to load that texture in from. So it should bring up a little File Explorer. Then you just go to where you save that. And if I click on this, it's going to apply that texture there. And then I can go in here and click on the swatch itself, and I can adjust things about the swatch like the brightness. So if I bring up my Enscape window on the side here, okay, and I play around with this brightness setting, you can see as I move this down to be darker, it's making it more and more see-through. And it's kind of creating this cool, like, glowing effect around the edges of the shade. So that's how I did that, and that's kind of just like a trick. But I also did that for the light bulb that's inside of this component, and I just downloaded this and loaded it in from the 3D warehouse. All right. So you would want to create these materials, these emissive materials. Right, it's not hard. You just create a new material, you name it, and then you apply it to the actual geometry. And then you just set them to be self-illuminated. You play with the luminance value, how bright is it going to be. So there, if I turn that up a little bit, it looks more like it's glowing, which is cool. But then you just, mess with the reflection value. So the lower the reflection value, the more it's going to look like a piece of glass, and the higher it's going to look more like something that's not shiny. And then just put in a cutout transparency map, and that's all there is to it. Now I'm going to show you one more thing you can do with cutout maps just so that you get the idea. So if I go back here into Photoshop, and this is just going to be me messing around really quick to illustrate the idea, I'm just going to make, I don't know, let's try 512 by 512, and then we'll make this like a 150 DPI. All right, so we just start out with a white square. So what I'm going to do is unlock that layer, and then I'm going to create a new layer, and then I'm going to create a circle. So my ellipse tool, and I'm just going to hold shift to make it a perfect circle, and I'm just going to put it sort of inside of my canvas here. I'm going to set it to be a solid fill of black. So let me set my color here, my foreground to black, and then go to fill, and then choose solid fill and turn off the stroke. So now I just have this black circle shape, and I'm going to center that up on my canvas. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Something like that. Okay, and now I'm going to merge all this together, and I'm going to invert this. Control I to invert. So now we have a white circle on a black background, and then I'm going to go to File and then Save As, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to save it as a PNG. Come on, File, Save As. Why it's not letting me save it as a... All right, File, Export, Quick Export as PNG, and then I'm going to call this Circle Cutout, just like that. And then I'll minimize. I'll go back here, and I'm going to pull up my material editor again, go to my cutout map, and I'm going to choose a different cutout map. And this time I'm going to choose that circle cutout to show you kind of the cool stuff that you can do with these cutout maps. Now I'm going to turn that all the way up, and I'm going to adjust the scale of this way down. So let's try 0.1 by 0.1. And I'll turn down the luminance so that you can maybe see it a little bit better. Oh my gosh. It's driving me crazy. All right, it's kind of broken on this one. Bad example. I'll do it on a different one. So I'm going to switch that back. Sorry, my dog is barking. All right, so switch back to my solid cutout. And I'll turn that down a little bit like that. Okay, I'm going to do this example on something else that I have in the scene. So if I close out of that and I go to my little floor mat down here. So this is basically just like a little floor mat like you would have in an office, right? That your chair sits on, just a plastic mat. But if I go to my materials, and I sample that material, so just using my eyedropper tool right here, sample that material, that's going to bring it up in my material editor. Then I can come down here to my transparency and switch that from transmittance to cutout. Then I can choose a cutout texture. And then choose my circle cutout. And then I can click on this and I can use my texture transformation and set that to something really small, like 0.1 by 0.1. So there you can see what that's doing. So anything that is white right now on the map is being solid, or yeah, you can't see through it, and then anything that's black is see-through. So if I invert that now, you can see there's the opposite effect. So that's what you use cutout maps for. All right, so that's not like the best application, but that should get the point across that if you want to use it for something like that, you can. So maybe the best place to use something like that in a real project would be, let's say you have a divider between two spaces and it's made out of some like kind of plastic or glass material and you want to have like a cool transparency to it. That's when you could use a cutout map to adjust that, right? And now I can just like set the color to be like something, see there, and then you have your solid material, and then anything else with the cutout is totally transparent, which is pretty cool. All right, so let me get rid of that, turn it back to how I had it. Regular transmittance transparency, that's just going to like set it so you have this slider where you can set it to be like more or less see-through. Okay, so just like that, and then you can just mess with your like roughness value to make it shiny or more glossy or less glossy. Okay, but that's pretty much how I had it, so that should be good. So I'm going to close back out of that. All right, so the last thing I'm going to show you is how to set up different views inside of Enscape. Okay, so as you're working on your model, something that you're probably going to have to do is turn on and off your ceiling to get inside the model and actually edit it. So when I'm trying to edit geometry in here, right, I have the ceiling turned off so I can see down inside of this. So if I were to go down here and turn my ceiling back on, obviously I'm not able to see down inside of the model to edit it. So whenever I have to turn off the ceiling, it kind of makes things harder because if I'm working over here inside an Enscape view, when I turn off the ceiling, it's just acting like there's no ceiling and it's making the scene way too bright and I can't actually see like what the lighting is doing. So the way around that is to use a little something called section planes. Now, section planes are a really important tool, and they're also used for setting up really cool views, which I'll show you as well. So like cool like 3D perspective views. So if we're just in our regular SketchUp view here, if you go up here to Tools and then you go to Section Plane, that's going to bring up this little blue rectangle thing. And if you hover it over a plane in your model, right, it's going to lock to it. So I'm going to hover it over top of my ceiling right there and click once. Then it's going to ask me to name this. So I'm going to call this one floor plan. All right. Now what you can do is grab that plane, and this works very similarly to sections inside of Revit. So in the past, we've messed around with section boxes in Revit. This is pretty much the same thing. I can grab this plane now, and I can move it. So use my move tool, and I can move it downward just a little bit so that it's cutting through that ceiling. So down here, somewhere like this, the ceiling disappears now. And then I can just go back in here. And well, before I do that, I'm gonna do something really quick. So if I right click on this section plane, I have this option. One, I can reverse this to only look upward, but I don't want that. I have this option to create group from slice. So basically anything that this is cutting through right now, it's going to make a sort of 2D line representation of. So if I click create group from slice, then I go up here to view and toggle off section planes, and then also toggle off section cuts. That's going to hide my section plane and my cut. But now you see I have this like blue line right here. So I can double click on that to isolate it, and there is what that section plane made for me. So you can see it cut through the walls, and it basically just created an outline of the shapes that they went through. Now, that's pretty cool because if I turn my plane back on, what you can do is basically turn a SketchUp model into an AutoCAD floor plan and export out as an AutoCAD plan into something like Revit. So I could move this all the way down to like the very bottom. So it's cutting through like my baseboards and my doors and stuff. And then I could click on this again and choose create group from slice. And then isolate that group. It's probably going to be easier though if you just hide all of this. So now you can see that line there. And if you click on it, now you just have a 2D drawing of everything that it cut through, right? So I can see my the cabinets of the desk and everything, and like the dividers and all that on the floor plan, and all the doors and the openings and like the casings and stuff. So that's really cool. That's like a really useful feature actually. And then you can just export this group out just as a 2D AutoCAD drawing into something like Revit if you wanted to do that. But another thing that we can use this for, so let me back out here and delete that. Well, just undo all of it. Undo. Okay. view, section planes, view, section cuts. So I'm going to move this section plane back up and align it where I had it originally. All right, so now that I have that section plane in place, I can go back to Enscape and I can turn my live updates back on, and you'll be able to see that it's going to preserve the lighting conditions as if there was a ceiling, but it's going to sort of take the ceiling off. So that way you can work on everything and see the lighting in the scene how it's meant to be. But you can also then switch back to SketchUp and you can work inside the model without having to turn the ceiling on and off. All right, so if I go back in here and just toggle off the section plane, that's going to hide that plane. Come on. It's going very slowly. So it hides the plane, but I can see down inside the model now and actually work on it without having to like hide my ceiling all the time and also mess up my Enscape viewport. So then the last thing that I'm going to show you now is how we can use these to actually set up some really cool views. So if I go back into Enscape, let me think here. Oh yeah, that's what I did. So I want to go here actually in SketchUp and I want to toggle to my top-down view. So now I'm kind of just getting like a floor plan view of the space. So now what I'm going to do is click on Add Scene. So down here in your Scenes tab, you can go to Add Scene and then you can create a new scene. And it should pop up here. So there's my new scene, scene 3. Then I can right click on this and I can rename it. And since I already have one in here called floor plan, I'm just going to call this one floor plan 2. Okay, so there's my floor plan 2. Now what I can do is go into Enscape again. And then over here on the side, if I go to View Management, I get my views that I create in SketchUp as my scenes over here within my View Manager. So now I can jump between them. So there's the floor plan view or floor plan 2 view that I made. And if I click on that, that's going to take me to sort of this top-down view. Okay, and you can make some really cool 3D perspective floor plans and stuff like that using this method. So now what I want to do is I want to tweak some things about how this is looking. All right, but I want to make sure that my settings that my visual settings that I'm tweaking don't mess up my other views. So if I set up a bunch of views, like I have a 3D view, for example, like right here. Let's say in that 3D view, I want to be able to see like outside and I want that background in there. But then when I go to my floor plan view, I don't want to have that background showing. So what you can do is in your visual settings, you can bring this up and then over here on the side, if yours isn't showing, it's just this little arrow right here. You can click on that arrow and it's going to expand this over here where you have presets. So you can create a preset, you can set all these settings how you want it, and then you click on create preset and then you just set this to whatever you want it to be called. So if you had like interior views and you want all the interior views to look the same, you just set that to interior. But then if you had one for like your floor plan, you could set that to be your floor plan. and then tweak the settings and make that for the floor plan. So if I click on floor plan here and then I go to my atmosphere, I can toggle on white background to make it so that there's no background or anything like that. Okay, and then if I switch to my floor plan view, now I go back here to the top-down perspective. I can adjust the settings. So if I click here now on this little thing next to it, I can go to where it says linked visual preset, and I can tie that to my floor plan 2 setting and click save. And now those two are linked. So now I can go back to my visual settings and I can adjust these so that everything looks correct. So let me see. What I'm going to have to do is turn off auto exposure. That's why that's looking weird. So turn off auto exposure, go to my image, turn off all this stuff, lens flare, bloom, vignette, all that, turn all that off. Go to my sun brightness, tweak that a little bit. You have artificial light brightness, which is going to control those artificial lights we put in and just make those brighter or darker. And then we have our exposure, which is just basically going to lighten or darken the entire image. Whenever you're using exposure, you tend to want to leave this, you're going to want to leave this between the 50 and 60 range, or else it's going to make everything look a bit too washed out. So right now it's looking a little bit washed out, so I'm going to have to mess with my like shadows and all of that. Let me turn off all my clouds. Turn off my fog. So then I can use my sun settings to bring the sunlight more into the space. And tweak my exposure up a little bit. And then you could even put on your outlines if you wanted to make it look more like a drawing. And then you also have these styles here, so you could set it to be like white mode if you want to, and that's basically just going to like take all the texture away and just make everything look like a clay model, which is really cool. That's really good for like early concept type stuff if you don't have textures in there yet, so you can kind of see what that looks like. But I'll set that back to none. So now what I want to do is add in sort of my poche to fill in those walls. So this is where that cutout, or not cutout, that group from slice that I did earlier comes in. So if I go here really quickly and let me turn off my live updates, go to view and then hide my section cuts. I'm going to find that group that I made the cutout of, and then go in here and I'm going to fill this in with some geometry. So I want to switch to my rectangle tool and go like that over those lines and delete out the middle. And then I'm going to give this a solid black color. So going up here to my materials, under colors, find the solid black and fill in that with a solid black color. So now if I turn my section cuts back on and go back to Enscape, come on. My model just like disappeared on me. Oh, I didn't. Okay, I have to turn my live updates back on. Duh. All right. Floor plan. Give it a minute to update. Oh. All right. Let me move my section plane down slightly. I think my section plane is intersecting with my ceiling, which is making it look weird. So if I go here back to view section planes and then move this down like that, and then hide my, I'm going to turn off section cuts, and then I'm going to grab that group that I had and I'm going to move it down so it aligns with my section plane again, and then I'm going to go back to view, turn section cuts back on, and then hide my section plane. Now let's see what it looks like. All right, view, section planes. Let's move the section plane up a little bit. Go back to this. There we go. So you have to have your section cut slightly above your view, or your group with the black filled in order for that to look right. All right, so then if I switch back to an interior view, it's going to automatically swap over to that 3D view. And in this case, I have a preset that I made for a 3D interior. So if I were to pull my 3D view or my visual settings back up, here's my 3D interior preset, and I can adjust anything in here that I want to. So maybe turn down my exposure a little bit so it's a little less intense. And play with the bloom and all that. All right, but basically I have my 3D interior presets, and those are just linked to the 3D views over here, right? So 3D interior is linked to the interior one view. And then the cool thing is I can move around within the model, and I can go to a different angle. Sure, something like that, for example. And then I can create a new view. So now here's my call this one like interior view 2 or something. All right, and then I can click that and I can link my preset to it. So there's my 3D interior preset, click on save. And then something else I can even do is go in here to my visual settings. And if I go to main and then go to where the camera projection says perspective, 2-point or orthographic, if I set that to 2-point, it's going to make my verticals perfectly straight, which honestly is usually what you want to set these interior 3D views to because it looks a lot better that way. All right. So that's looking pretty good. So then that's just going to save that view like that. And then I can just jump around between all my interior views. So now if I switch to that one, come on. My computer is just running so slow today. So hopefully it's faster on yours. But see, I just was able to jump around between those 2 points there. And then I can even jump back to my floor plan if I want to. It's just very, very slow. All right, there's my floor plan. And then what I usually like to do on these floor plans, just to wrap this up, is under my visual settings, I like to adjust my field of view in really close. So something like as close as I can, something like that. So that way you're kind of getting just like more of a zoomed in look at this. And then this is something that you can just like render out and put on your board and just have like a really cool looking 3D floor plan, right? If you were to do this the other way, and then that's going to zoom you out, but then when you zoom in, you can see how that really exaggerates the perspective. So now it looks like you're really like, everything looks really tall, and that's why you want to avoid doing those really high field of views. But if you do something like a little bit lower and then just zoom out, it's going to look a little bit nicer, right? And you just want to make sure that your exposure is set at something good to where it's easy to read, maybe something like that. And then you can also do the exact same thing that I showed you for this floor plan. You can do that in an elevation view as well. So if you want to create a really cool looking elevation, you can do the exact same thing for that too. Oh, and one last thing is if you didn't want this to be a perspective view, you could set this to be orthographic, and that's just going to make it totally flat. So this is just like a traditional looking floor plan now. All right. So I think that's going to do it for this video. This has gone long enough, and it probably took way longer than it should have because my computer is just not wanting to cooperate today. But on your own, go ahead and just kind of like take some of the stuff that I showed you today and start getting your scene looking a little bit more finished like mine is here. So I have all of my furniture put in, and I put in some props around the room just to make it look a little bit nicer. And then I went ahead and I did my lighting as well. So try to get as much of that in this week as you can, because next week we're going to focus more on the final rendering aspect. So I'm going to be showing you how to output some high quality renderings and do like 3D panoramas and stuff like that, and actually put it into a walkthrough format. So yeah, try to get it to a similar point that I have mine here, right? Play around with the materials, do all the lighting and stuff like that. And then that way you'll be ready for next week whenever we go ahead and actually render these things. All right.